So we're basically ready to begin. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to our live streaming audience who are watching from points far and near. My name is Stella Kramer. I'm a photo editor and creative consultant, and I'm thrilled to be here in Boston for the Flash Forward Festival. Today I'm going to be introducing Aline Smithson, who'll be talking about her work, her famous photo blog Lin Scratch, and how she does what she does. Following this presentation, we'll have a panel at 4 o'clock that I hope you'll all stay for. That's called Critique and the Creative Process, Photography in and Out of the Academy, presented by the Photographic Resource Center. So that's at 4 o'clock here. I hope all of you have had a chance to look at the fantastic exhibits we have here, Humble Arts, Maxine Helfman, and Aline Smithson. And upstairs, the Flash Forward 2011 photo exhibit and the mini book fair hosted by Printed Matter and Indie Photo Book Library. There's also work on the grounds around the hotel, and there's work around the city. We hope you'll join us here at 7 o'clock for the official opening of the Humble Arts, Aline Smithson, and Maxine Helfman exhibits. We want to, as always, thank our sponsors, TD Bank, who's been with Flash Forward since the beginning, and our fabulous hosts, the Fairmont Battery Wharf. Eileen is going to talk about the impact of her blog, Lin Scratch, as well as her own photography practice and influences, and her support for emerging artists of all ages. After a career as a New York fashion editor and working alongside the greats of fashion photography, Aline Smithson discovered the family Rolleiflex and never looked back. Now represented by galleries in the US and Europe and published throughout the world, Aline continues to create her award-winning photography with humor, compassion, and a 50-year-old camera. Her work has been featured in numerous publications, including the cover of PDN, the PDN Photo Annual, Communication Arts Photo Annual, Eyemazing, Soura, Visura, Fraction, Artworks, Lenswork Extended, Shots, and Silvershotz magazines. She has exhibited widely, including solo shows at the Griffin Museum of Photography, the Fort Collins Museum of Contemporary Art, the Lishui Festival in China, the Tagomago Gallery in Barcelona and Paris, and the Wallspace Gallery in Seattle and Santa Barbara. Aline writes and edits the blog Lin Scratch, has been the gallery editor for Light Leaks magazine, is a contributing writer for Diffusion, Too Much Chocolate, Lucida, and F-Stop magazines, has written book reviews for Photoeye, and has been curating and jurying exhibitions for a number of galleries and online magazines. She was a 2009, 2010, and 2011 juror for Critical Mass, and a reviewer at Review LA in 2010 and 2011, amongst other venues. Though she was nominated for the Excellence in Photographic Teaching Awards in 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2011, and for the Santa Fe Prize in Photography in 2009 by Center, she considers her children her greatest achievement. Without further ado, Aline Smithson.
Wow. Thank you, Stella. What Stella didn't mention is that she herself is a Pulitzer Prize-winning photo editor and an amazing advocate for photographers, and has come from New York City to be a presenter at this festival, which is pretty cool. So thank you, Stella. I'd like to also give a shout out to Andy Adams, who is live streaming the events at the Flash Forward Festival. So hello, Andy. And I'd like to also say hello to my Los Angeles photographic family. A huge, huge thank you to Marianne Camarelli, Alicia Slatkin, and the Flash Forward staff for inviting me to be here today. I am truly honored to be part of this amazing festival, surrounded by so many image makers and part of the photography community in Boston. When I got the news and the invitation to come speak at Flash Forward, I was sitting in a cold hotel room in Santa Fe where it was snowing, having just spent 14 hours with my students at the Santa Fe workshops. I was shoveling down a bag of flaming hot Cheetos and reading my email, and I was already in a surreal mental space, and this wonderful opportunity set my mind spinning into that dark space of fear and self-doubt. One questions upon receiving such a lovely invitation, am I worthy? Is my work good enough? What could I possibly speak about for an hour? And most importantly, what will I wear? I thought about what I wanted to discuss today, along with sharing my work and photographic history. I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be authentic in this post-authentic world. We are living virtual lives. We are constantly distracted, changing the way our brains work. This has its good and bad qualities. The good is that our work is seen immediately all over the world and the internet. And the Facebook and Twitter community of cheerleaders make us feel a little less alone in this pursuit. But we have to work hard to not let those things define our work. We have to step away from the roar of the crowd and simply make photographs in a space that is clear of everything but our inner voice. What it boils down to is being true to who you are, making work that is personal yet universal. It's being aware of our time in history and our time in photography. It's taking time to understand each other without throwaway judgment, and recognizing that we all have value. For me, the work that resonates most as authentic is work that exposes something about yourself and your life. If we tell our stories, we share in the dialogue of life. So what I share today with you is myself at my most authentic. It's a self that has clarity and integrity. It's a self that drinks martinis and dances to hip hop. It's a self that says, fuck it and let's do it, all in the same breath. And it's a self that wants to make work that is uniquely my own, drawn from my life, yet is continually inspired by the world around me. And if I'm truly being authentic, I will share with you that I am nervous about speaking today, so I'm imagining you all sitting on the toilet, reading a good book. I write a photography blog called Lin Scratch. I started because I'm a person who is curious about other people, and I thought it would be a great way for myself and my students to learn about contemporary photographers. I post every day, and it's a huge commitment of time and energy. But what I didn't expect was how much I would benefit from sharing other people's work. I have learned so much, been moved to tears, moved to laughter, moved to action. I have made new friends all over the world and helped provide opportunities for acknowledgement and exposure. I think it's important to take time to understand a photographer's intentions and also make sure that this journey is not all about me. I don't want this to be a solo expedition. I want to surround myself with others who are working towards the same goals and share in their experiences. So I'd like to start off by celebrating this amazing community of photographers in Boston. You are so lucky to be making work in a city that is rich with opportunity and inspiration. If we just look at the Griffin Museum, Paula Tonarelli, who's right over here, she creates about 110, 120 exhibition opportunities every year for emerging photographers. That is huge. There are an array of wonderful galleries and museums. There's the Photo Resource Center at Boston University. And in case you don't know him, photographer Paul Griser, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, has created a roster of insightful photographer podcasts with his thoughts on photography created right here in Cambridge. I'm also sharing these photographers today because I feel it's so important to connect with your community, to find a support system and to find a group of like-minded friends. My apologies in advance for the many omissions I make here today, in particular Meg Birnbaum, but it might still be in there, we'll see. And I know I am just scratching the surface of the Boston community. All I can say is to reach out to each other and make some new friends. I have to say that more has come to me and to my career from my relationships with other photographers than from anywhere else. And now, some of the wonderful image makers creating work in and around the city of Boston. Caleb Cole, who gave me a wonderful introduction at the Focus Awards Wednesday night. John Chervinsky, Henry Horenstein, Rania Matar, Arno Raphael Minkinen, Jess Dugan, who has just moved to Chicago, but she's still very involved in Boston. Francis Jakubiak, we all know from the Griffin Museum. Blake Fitch, Neil Rantoul, Paris Visson, Suzanne Reevy, right, how do you say it? Ravy. Fran Foreman, Stephen Dorado, Christopher Chadburn, Ellen Renard, Sig Harvey, Asya Kepka, Chehalas Hegner, Greer Muldowney, Paul Grieger, I'm saying it wrong, Peter Vanderwarker, Chris Churchill, Olivia Parker, Pele Cass, Stella Johnson, Elaine O'Neill, Katie Minute, Keiko Hiromi, Paulo Morales, Keith Prue, Nadine Boughton, and Marianne Meehan. And if you don't know, Marianne has an amazing exhibition in the city of Brockton where her work is all over the walls of that city. So I hope you get a chance to see it. So let me just take. I am, again, sorry for the omissions. Next time, you'll be on there. I've had a variety of careers prior to photography, so I will bring you up to speed as quickly as possible. I was born in Los Angeles, California, in a neighborhood called Silver Lake that hugs the Hollywood sign and is a wonderful mix of ethnicities, quirkiness, and most importantly, mid-century architecture. I had an early appreciation for the architecture that surrounded my neighborhood by architects such as Richard Neutra, John Lautner, and Frank Lloyd Wright. And I would like to say that I'm happily married to an architect. My father was born in Arizona and in one of his many careers, he was a cowboy and trick writer. He was that last generation of hard scrabble men who crisscrossed the country in search of work. He had a can-do attitude about all things, including becoming a photographer. My father was working in Alaska as a photographer, documenting construction sites when he met my mother on a bus. She had come to Alaska wearing high heels and a hat in search of a husband. And he followed her back to Los Angeles, where my sister and I were born. I had a great childhood, full of humor, music, a wide array of pets, and long summer days filled with ordinary nothingness that allowed my imagination to flourish. I also spent hours on the living room rug reading album covers, which I now know was the beginning of my love for the square image. I have always had a pencil or paintbrush in my hand, and I had two passions growing up, art and fashion. I studied painting in college and was influenced by painters such as Mark Rothko, David Hockney, John Baldessari, and Ed Ruscha. The two artists that influenced me the most were Richard Diebenkorn and James McNeill Whistler. I was painting large abstract oils and moved to New York City to follow in the footsteps of the great abstract expressionists, and began working as a gallerista on 57th and Madison. Though I met the movers and shakers of New York City at that job, it did not take me long to become disenchanted with the art world, as the gallery owner was deeply into drugs and went on to murder a young Danish fashion student during a night of kinky sex. So, it was at that time I was offered a job in fashion, and I wanted to get the hell out of there, and a new career looked wonderfully promising. I started off putting on fashion shows around the country, and after a year or so, I was asked to be the fashion editor for Vogue Patterns and Vogue Knitting magazines. I was responsible for all the photography, the styling, the hair, the makeup, for 19 publications a year. At this point, the thought of being a photographer myself had not entered the equation. But I learned a lot standing next to the likes of Mario Testino, Patrick Demarchelier, Arthur Elgort, and even Horst. As a fashion editor, I learned how to work with people, how to move a group towards a common purpose. I learned how important it is to be kind, to be organized, and to bring a level of humor and enthusiasm to the set each day. I observed those photographers who succeeded and those who weren't worth working with again. After a decade in fashion, life moved me to the West Coast, complete with a husband and two small children. It wasn't easy finding myself in this new role without friends and the excitement of New York City. I ventured into fashion design and one day decided I needed to learn how to take better photographs of my children. I've always been a slow learner, but the light bulb went off pretty quickly, and I knew that I had finally found my path and way of being an artist in the world. It was in front of me all the time, and I didn't see it. With the exception of a few classes, I am self-taught. I would drop the kids off at school, and I would head to the office, in other words, the darkroom, where I spent hours learning my craft and becoming part of a community. I started looking at the work of Matt Mahurin, whose dark images evoked something mysterious and slightly ominous. This photograph hung over my desk for years, and my children just could never quite understand it, but it's pretty striking. I also looked at Keith Carter, who brought a level of humanity to his portraits and a sensitivity to his place in the world. And I was also drawn to old hand-colored postcards from Japan that brought a faded color palette to the visual experience. At first, I started photographing my children and their friends. Every child that came over for a play date was subject to the lens. I had that Genesis life-changing moment when I discovered my uncle's 1960s 2.8F Rolleiflex in the garage and shot this photograph. It was the first time I was able to acknowledge an image that was more than what I had seen through the viewfinder. For a number of years, I continued to work in black and white because I wanted control over the printing. I discovered the toy camera and found a wonderful community of online photographers sharing the same passion. I love sharing this image as I remember a teacher telling me how important it was to wait for the light. That wasn't possible for me in my life at that time. I was driving south on Highway 101 with my family in the car. It was raining, and I passed this sign, and I knew it would make a great photo. I did a wild U-turn on the highway with a car of screaming kids, got out, took one shot, and continued south. That was the way I had to work. I became active in the toy camera community, and it led to the opportunity to be the gallery editor of Light Leaks magazine. Working on those issues were a complete pleasure, and I'm sad to say that it's no longer in print. I decided it was time to create some color work, yet I didn't know how to print color, so I decided I would hand paint my photographs. At the time, it seemed like a natural thing to do, as I had been a painter. At this point, I'm beginning to question that decision. As evidences the show outside, every time I sell one of those photographs, I have to repaint it. I discovered a small print of Whistler's arrangement in black and gray at a local garage sale, and it set me on a new path. That same day, I found a leopard coat and hat, a cat painting, and a chair that was eerily similar to the one that Whistler had used. And I knew I was on to something. It was incredibly satisfying. It was incredibly satisfying and creative experience that allowed me to do all the things that I loved: styling, painting, eBay and thrift store shopping, exploring humor and connections, and spending time with my mother. She was 83 when I started and 85 when I finished, and she died shortly after I finished the photography part of this series. She never saw the series painted, and I know she would be amazed to see where this series has gone. Exhibitions in the US and Europe, and published throughout the world, most recently in the Middle East. If I have any advice for you, it's to make work that has humor. People are dying for that. Some of these were particularly fun. For instance, this one is a paint by number painting. So to repaint a paint by number is interesting. I wanted to share this image as it's my favorite. When my mother was modeling, I would often tell her to look serious, though she wanted to be more dramatic and actress-like. On this day, she couldn't stop laughing, and I couldn't figure out why, until finally I noticed she was giving me the finger. At the same time, I was working on a series titled Recreating History. I had heard the tales of a friend's grandmother spending time as a young woman in Russia and China in the 1920s, and it set my imagination on fire. I decided to create portraits of my family and friends that were more than snapshots, bringing a sense of history and nostalgia. These are also silver gelatin prints that are hand-painted. And I had to throw this in. But this was a complete surprise. They didn't even tell me. I found it on the website. I thought I'd share this behind the scenes shot. It's just fabric stapled up against my garage and working with my two wonderful models, my mother and daughter. You can do this too. I was still active in the toy camera community and always packed a toy camera with me whenever my children and I went on an outing. While on a trip to Legoland, I began the series Unreal Reality. I was only able to get my children to return to Legoland with me twice more. And after that, I had the odd experience of attending a theme park alone, waiting in line for rides and spending time with families that were not my own. With toy camera work, I've discovered that when you remove the color and the scale, it changes how one perceives the subject. I particularly like the ominous quality that toy cameras bring to happy places like amusement parks and theme parks. I have continued to be fascinated with found photographs. For 25 years, I have collected photographs found on the ground. Then I started to collect more formal portraits culled from dusty cardboard boxes from thrift stores and ratty suitcases from flea markets. I wanted to figure out a way to re-energize these photographic portraits and let them, in a sense, live again. In order to infuse life into the images, I asked people of the same gender and approximately the same age to hold the photograph, leaving room for the viewer to connect the living to those who had passed on. I feel a quiet satisfaction that the portraits got to see the sun and the stars again, to be held and recognized with love and dignity. An interesting story about this image is that a friend of a friend came across this image on my website and got chills. It was her baby picture. And to this day, neither of us are quite sure how I came to acquire it, but in a city of 4 million, it is indeed remarkable. Around this time, the community darkroom, where I had been printing for almost a decade, came to an abrupt close. I not only lost a community of friends, but a place of work and creativity. I was angry at the photo world, angry about all the changes that were taking place with the advent of digital imagery. I started thinking about the state of photography, its pursuit, the business of it, the idea of selling an image, the artist's viewpoint, the MFA School of Imagery, the death of the wet darkroom, iconic photography, toy cameras and digital cameras, editions and print sizes, old rules, new challenges, all currents that we photographers have to navigate in the photographic waters. As a darkroom printer, I have found the meditative and creative state that I experience so important to my work. It's where I make my mark. It's where much of the thinking about the image takes place. And losing that experience as part of the process was not an option I wanted to face. I set out, let me go back. I think I left off something there, sorry. At the same time, I was tired of the pursuit of the perfect print. I wanted to have fun again. I wanted to use the darkroom as a place to explore new ideas and new ways of working. I set out to deconstruct images, overlap and cut my negatives, add text and texture through traditional methods in the darkroom, and add washes of oil paint to the surface, and discard the idea of perfection. I wanted to take a jab at what feels familiar, and I wanted to explore the idea of creating a photograph, what it captures, and the memory it creates. Shot with a toy camera, the Diana, I wanted the shadows and stains of my photographic fingerprints as evidence that I was there in a dark room. Every summer, my family and I travel to a beautiful lake south of Boston, not far from the Cape, to dip our feet in ancestral waters. My husband's great-grandparents built homes on a lake over a century ago, and little has changed since then. For almost 2 decades, we've packed up our expectations and headed east to layer new memories onto the old. There's something magical about knowing that 100 years later, we are taking pleasure in the same activities, swimming in the same water, running up and down the same stairways, enjoying the same vistas from a house that has traces from each preceding generation. When I first started to photograph the lake many years ago, I worked exclusively in black and white. The limited palette seemed to echo the ancient family photos that line the walls and bring a sense of history to the work. But recently, when I started working in color, I felt a sense of renewal that brought our activities into the now. No matter how I capture this annual experience, it remains a magical corner of the world that I pack in my heart each time I leave. It is my paradise. I have to say that this magazine got passed down to every single person that year. While spending time at the lake house, I began to notice my children's lack of appreciation for objects left by previous generations, and I created the series In Case of Rain. We live in a world of technical distractions. I see my children gathered around their computers as though it's a summer campfire, faces aglow as they peer into a world of friends and fantasy, participating in new forms of entertainment that further remove them from the childhood that I experienced. Today's generation has lost touch with the activities that previous generations have enjoyed: reading a good book in a comfortable chair, playing board games on a rainy day, flipping through Life magazines, or sprawling out on the living room rug while listening to records and reading the backs of album covers. And it's because of this that I have been looking at bookshelves and untouched childhood pursuits with a new eye. With great sadness, I realize that these objects will someday be obsolete, at least in their current incarnations. And like a curator of antiquities, I now see them as beautiful objects to be admired and preserved, if only on film. I can only hope for a rain, a heavy rain, and a power outage. I grew up a stone's throw from Hollywood and Vine, and I've always been intrigued by the real and the manufactured idea of Hollywood. The staged Hollywood at home photographs from the 40s and 50s of celebrities at play with their children in their own homes are particular favorites of mine. In a reality TV society where celebrity and stardom is now possible without talent or reason, the idea that anyone can be a star is indeed a reality. This series looks at the idea of elevating family and friends into a false stardom, where they perhaps are just on the verge of being discovered, happy to participate in the artificial glorification of who they really are. You never know where the idea for a series is going to come from. Late at night, I was doing some eBay surfing and came across an amazing hat. Something compelled me to buy it, and unfortunately, not only buy that hat, but others that were similar. Director Michael Apted based his famous documentary series, 7 Up through, I think is now 56 Up, on the Jesuit maxim, "Give me the child until he is 7, and I will give you the man." The thought is that who you are at 7 will be who you are as an adult. In this case, I give you the girl. Spring Fever explores the idea of childhood and beyond, capturing 7-year-old girls wearing 1950s Easter hats, juxtaposing hats traditionally worn by women half a century older with the visual of a child on the threshold of knowledge and sophistication allows us a glimpse into the future, and possibly a reflection of a face that wore a head full of flowers long ago. Some believe that articles of clothing hold the essence of the original owner. It's my hope that we are not only looking at a contemporary face, but an echo of a person that once wore a hat covered in flowers, worn during a church service or a garden luncheon, when once upon a time we celebrated spring with fanfare and a hat. I have been wanting to explore the idea of creating a visual language from sound. So I started off by counting to 10 in French. Deux, trois, quatre, cinq, cease, set, wheat, noof, and D's. What's next? What's next seems to be a question that we not only ask ourselves each time we finish a project, but the photo world is also wondering what else we have up our sleeves. I often think that creating a photographic project is not unlike movie making. You create the work, then you spend the next several years promoting it, only to begin again from square one. Not always easy to do for creative people, especially those who work in conceptual genres. I think we need to say out loud that we all have uninspired periods, that in a climate of so many incredible image makers, it is hard to stay confident and feel like you are making career headway. I think photographers need to know that it's okay to slow down, to step away, and reboot your energies. And so, feeling in one of those periods myself, I will share a few projects that are slowly taking shape with no urgency for completion. This is an image from a series that I'm working on titled Portraits of Portraits, where I pay homage to photographs and paintings by creating still lifes that celebrate those images. This is an ongoing series titled Converging Conversations, taking two unrelated images, combining them to create a new narrative. I'm also interested in creating portraits that are painterly, exotic, and timeless, so I will continue to work on these. I'm working on a large project about a 90-year-old marionette master and a theater that I attended as a child and my children attended, and I really have about a year or two to capture the work before he closes down the theater, so there's some urgency there. And finally, I've been working on a children's book for several years, and I'm now in the market for a publisher. It's about the search for self and learning life's most important lesson. I will show you the first and the last image and let your imagination fill in the rest. He was born in a box. Okay, you get to fill it in. I'd like to finish by bastardizing Bruce Springsteen's closing remarks at the recent South by Southwest Festival. So rumble, young photographers, rumble. Open your eyes and open your hearts. Don't take yourself too seriously, and take yourself as seriously as death itself. Don't worry. Worry your ass off. Have ironclad confidence, but doubt. It keeps you awake and alert. Believe you are the baddest ass in town, and you suck. It keeps you honest, it keeps you authentic. Be able to keep two completely contradictory ideas in your head and heart at all times. If it doesn't drive you crazy, it will make you strong. Stay hard, stay hungry, and stay alive. And when you pick up your camera to bring the vision, treat it like it's all we have, and then remember, it's only a photograph. Thank you so much for your time. I hope to see you all tonight at the opening reception here from 7 to 10, and I guess we are going to open this up for questions.
Eileen, first I just want to say from probably everyone sitting here, thank you for all that you do for us artists, for the community, for people interested in learning more about photography. I don't know how you do it all, but thank you.
Oh.
I wanted to ask you about all the teaching that you do and how you got involved with that and how that affects your personal work.
For the last 12 years, I've been teaching photographic workshops in Los Angeles through the Julia Dean Photo Workshops. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I realized that there was this missing component in teaching that was teaching photographers about how to put their work out into the world. So I teach a 3-part class called Next Step 1, Next Step 2, Next Step 3, and each class brings the person closer to succeeding in the photo world. And I have to say, I'm just so proud of my students. They're just doing amazingly well. I also teach a class called Finding Your Vision, which is for a lot of photographers are all about the technical part of photography, and they forget they actually have to take pictures. So that class really teaches photographers how to think about making work. And then I teach an 8-month-long class called the Personal Project, where students work on a project. I'm also teaching now at the Santa Fe Photo Workshops. I have a workshop coming up next spring. It's 4 days long, and you will come away with a lot of knowledge about how to get your work out into the world. And I'm also now teaching a lot at photo festivals. I'll be teaching at the Filter Photo Festival in Chicago, at Photo NOLA in New Orleans, at the Medium Festival in San Diego, and I think I'm teaching at the Center for Fine Art Photography as part of the SPE Southwest Convention. So, anyone else have a question?
Eileen, on your color work, what medium do you like? I assume that's film, not
Yes.
digital. What's your favorite film?
I use Portra 400.
Is it in danger of being discontinued, do you think? It's a beautiful film.
I hope not. You know, I haven't started hoarding the film yet, but it's like every time I want to go print in the darkroom, the paper I was just using is out, so it's a little scary.
Are you printing that color work yourself?
I'm printing it digitally, yes. I print everything myself. I scan in the negative, and then I print it, yeah. So if anyone has any questions about getting your work into the photo world, I mean, now's your opportunity. And don't ask a real broad question, like, how do I do that? But.
Question. How has the online world helped you put your work out there? Because there was mention of several online venues, Fraction Magazine being one of them. Have you ever put yourself on your own blog?
Yes, I did it on my birthday.
So how are the other things that are online? How do you use them, or what do you think of them in terms of how to put your work out there?
Well, I really think that it is very, very expensive to be a photographer, a fine art photographer. And entering all these competitions, going to portfolio reviews, it's all a lot of money out the door. So for me, the online world, the online e-zines, the blogs are a great way to get your work under tons of eyes without spending any money. One year I decided I was not going to submit to anything except magazines. And I would go to the museum and I would look through all the magazines and I would look who to submit to. And I realized that we all think that the gallery show is the holy grail. But when you think about it, sometimes it's only 200 people maybe that make their way through the gallery. When you're published or online, thousands of people see your work. And it also extends who is looking at your work. It's not just a regional audience. So that's an amazing thing. And just the ability to be able to communicate with photographers that you admire, to email someone, it's the internet has really changed everything. So. I can't hear you.
Can you get the
Wait, we're getting this.
Except when the whole world is on the internet, what's the likelihood that someone will see yours or mine website unless they look specifically for the name?
Probably no one is going to seek out your website unless your work is somewhere else, like in a exhibition online, in a magazine, on a blog. Finding your work randomly on a website is very rare.
Aline, not to be too self-serving, but could you talk about print-on-demand photo books as a way of getting your work out there?
No, I think I'll let you do that. But this is Rex from A&I in Los Angeles, and they have a terrific organization for print-on-demand photo books.
workshop on Sunday?
Yes, workshop on Sunday.
When you're working on a few different projects at once, how do you approach getting those projects seen? Do you try to focus in on one project and really try to get that seen, or do you try to put them all out there? Or?
Well, this is the way I work. I usually am working on 4 or 5 projects at once. That just works for me. And I think of it as piggy banks. I'll make a few images that go in one piggy bank, and then, because my life, it's not a straight line. You know, I can't completely focus on one project at a time. What I have sort of found over the years is that this is how it works. You really only need 3 killer images from one body of work to get started. Because a lot of these competitions want 3 images. But they have to all be just stellar images, and when you're submitting, you should always submit work from the same body of work, because what that allows a curator or juror to do is to possibly select 2 or 3 images to hang together. If you submit flowers and you submit an oceanscape and something else, the juror can't hang that work together. It also shows the juror that you're a professional. So for a while, you might want to submit those 3 images over and over as you're working on the rest of the series. So you're generating interest for that series. And if you look now, a lot of competitions have different themes. So one project you're working on may not be appropriate for that theme, but it might really work well for another theme. So that's, for me, the great thing about working on a lot of different things at once.
So I found over the years that the cost of submitting to various juried shows, the fee has risen, and some places that have even talked about in their literature how this is becoming a fundraiser. I know it's hard for nonprofits, you know, to stay afloat, but so in light of that, there are so many, how does one make a decision and decide which is really going to benefit you to write your check and apply?
Okay, so I think you need to think of the photo world overall as a nonprofit. Galleries are struggling. Everyone is struggling, so every competition helps support that organization. And we can all complain about it, but we are so lucky to have so many opportunities. And it's up to us to choose whether to do it or not do it. So what I do is that I look at a juror who I really want to get my work under the eyes of. In some ways, I don't even care if I get in the show. I just want the juror to see the work. And then sometimes I submit to something because I really believe in that organization and I want to support that organization. So that's how lately I've been making my choices. As an emerging photographer, if you haven't shown, work and shipped a lot of work. There are a number of galleries that have wonderful programs for emerging photographers, like the Vermont Photo Place, the Amanda Smith Gallery in Texas, the Kat Kiernan Gallery in Virginia, and they will print and frame your work at just really nominal cost so that you don't have to struggle with the shipping, packing, framing, and all of that stuff. And those are great places to start submitting to at the beginning of your career.
There's so much that you're doing. You're exhibiting, you're curating, you're portfolio reviewing, not to mention Lenscratch. Can you talk a little bit about how you balance all of these different components that, that must demand so much of your time daily?
Well, I have to say the thing that suffers the most is the ability to make my own work. And I refuse to teach in the summer, so that helps. But it's interesting, at the beginning of this year, I kind of looked out over the year, and besides my teaching, I didn't really have anything going on, and I thought, great, this will be one of those kind of quiet years. And then all this stuff started coming, and you can't say no, because this is what you work for. So you just have to, you know, sometimes things slip through the cracks. Sometimes I don't get back to everybody that emails me, but I try my hardest, and it's really a juggling act. The one thing that I have also found really hard is that I'm now being asked to juror a lot of competitions. I was one of the jurors for Review Santa Fe. I usually juror Critical Mass, and what that means is that I can't submit. So I have to choose whether to juror or to submit. So it's a lucky thing to have to make that decision, but I still have to make that decision.
How do you go about deciding on edition sizes, both physical dimensions for something, and if you're going to have, you know, different sizes and how many for each?
I would say to not have more than 3 sizes per body of work. Probably 2 sizes would be better. The way that the art world is working is that the larger the piece, the smaller the edition number. So the galleries are looking at it as if it's the same size as a painting, they only want you to have maybe 3 in your edition. If it's an 11 by 14, I don't edition any higher than 15 anymore. That's kind of, I used to edition this hand-painted series that I have to repaint is an edition in 25 in 2 sizes. But it sells well, so I'm glad that it has a long life. But most of my editions now are at 15, and that's for sizes that are 17 by 22 and 13 by 19. When you start printing larger than 17 by 22, your framing costs are out of control. One of my friends just had a show, and she had, I don't know, it was like a 4 by 6 foot piece. She was selling it for $3,000. Her costs to get it printed, mounted, and framed were over $1,500. So if she sold that piece, she would have to pay the gallery because they want their 50%. She will make no money off of that sale. It's really something to consider when you start printing large, unless you're selling work for $10,000, but that's really rare these days.
Can you talk a little about your blog and how you come to how you come to make choices of whose work you're going to feature on your blog?
I really don't have any method. I look at a lot of work, and I also really feel like I want to be a champion for all photographers. What I have found is that there is a lot of sites that look at younger photographers, MFA graduates, and I'm also interested in seeing somebody that lives out in the Southwest that's making work that never gets their work on a blog, but it's great work. And so some of my favorite blog posts are people that I know would never get on another blog, and they are so appreciative of being acknowledged. And I opened the blog up for submissions for about a week, and it was just overwhelming, so I closed the submissions. But usually I just find people, and then I loved the process of contacting them, writing about them, and finding out about their life and why they're making the work they make. I get a lot of mail. I don't actually look at a lot of blogs because I just don't have time. But somehow in the osmosis, there's images constantly flicking in front of my face, so that's how I find people.
For those of us who still like to do wet laboratory work, I know you do all your own, or did all your own. I don't, because I don't have the facility, but I use a lab in North Carolina, which is doing okay. But I'd like to see some other work from other places. Are there one or two that you know of that are really good doing gelatin silver in the traditional way?
That labs that will do it for you. You know, I mean, Rex might want to talk about this with A&I, but you know, a lot of labs have closed. And sometimes you can find an individual that has a darkroom that will do printing for you. So that's also an option, but Rex might want to. Anybody else? There's one back.
So I'm curious, because you seem like you're a very well-established artist and all that stuff, but you still submit to all the things that I'm submitting to, and I'm not a very well-established artist. And in my fantasy, when I am well-established, I will not be submitting to these things because people will be knocking down my door, and I won't need to pay those $50 every 2 weeks or whatever. Do you feel like you'll ever get to that point, or?
I don't think I'll get to that point until I have a New York gallery. I think that is the pinnacle. That's when you stop. And hopefully you have a gallerist that is working their ass off for you. Here's how it works. You make a body of work, you put it out there, and then everyone gets tired of that body of work. They want to see what's next. And no matter where you are on that scale, you got to jump back in and start all over again. I remember thinking somebody I knew was writing an article for a magazine, and they contacted Keith Carter, who was at one point just this hot photographer, well purchased, well exhibited, and he was so excited that someone was writing about him because the photo world moved on, and they weren't writing about his work anymore. And I think that keeping yourself out there in some way is kind of, at some point you do stop submitting to group shows. But what I have done is, really submitting more for the juror. And it is really discouraging because I have been where you are when you see someone that is further along the path and you're like, why are they, that's not fair, and I make all my students submit to the exact same things I'm submitting to, and they get in and I don't. And you know what? That's okay, because I think you learn from getting rejected. You learn from maybe why your work didn't fit in, and honestly, after a while, you're like, yay, I don't have to ship, I don't have to spend that extra $200. So you have to have a really good attitude about these things and not take it personally, but you just have to stay in the game, because once you're off the radar, you're off the radar. It's just everyone and their dog is a photographer now. So, anything else? Well, thank you so much.
I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank our live stream audience. I'd like to remind you that there's an official opening here at 7 o'clock down here for the show that's on the walls right now, Humble Arts, Aline Smithson and Maxine Helfman's work. Upstairs, we have the Flash Forward 2011 exhibition and the Printed Matter and Indie Photo Book Library Mini Book Fair. We want to once again thank our sponsors, TD Bank, our host, Fairmont Battery Wharf, and all of you. Please stay, enjoy. The next panel that starts at 4 o'clock is Critique and the Creative Process, Photography in and Out of the Academy, presented by the Photographic Resource Center. That'll be a great one. Please stay for that. Come back tomorrow, bring your friends, and thank you again.